You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with me today is Mr. Bob Taylor from Salisbury. Thank you. Mr. Joe Scafino from Salisbury. Thanks for being here.
Yep.
So, gentlemen, you were hoping at the last county council meeting, the first one of October, that there would be some sort of acknowledgement of the issues that came about from Councilman James Wynn's reading of 5 Bible passages.
And it's actually, everything's right here, the answers. This is truth. You've got the beginning, you've got the present, and you've got the ending written right here. And I have a few scriptures that I'd like to read, if that's okay. It'd be quick. And I've got them highlighted here, John. Genesis 50:20. But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good to bring to pass, as it is in this day, to save much people alive. Now, a lot of evil things happen, but we have to recognize that there's been good from this. I've had friends get saved over this. Now we've got, Jesus. Literally. Jesus. I'm telling you, it's been a rough week for me. It's been a rough week for a lot of people that I know. John, I'm nervous, but take your time. Thank you, buddy. Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for good to them who are the called according to his purpose. Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. God called us to be salt and light. What does salt do to grass? When you throw salt on the grass, it changes. When you throw light in the dark, it brightens. We have to remember that yes, it was tragic what's happened, and this world is tragic. I agree. But we have to come back to this. And let me read you another one, and I believe this was Charlie, the 5 talents. 25, Matthew 25:20. And so he that received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. And with closing, I have one verse that I'd like to read us. It's from Revelation. And yes, it is tragic that I believe he was a martyr for his faith. Not just because of his political beliefs, but because of his faith. And we can have debate and disagree on that. That's okay. But that's my belief. Revelation 6:9. And when he had opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, O how, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto every one of them. And it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. And I just want everybody to really think about this. I know not everyone here is a Christian, and that's okay. I'll pray for you. And, there's only one way. There's only one way. And that's through Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior.
You sent in a letter, and you haven't seen a response, and that's kind of prompted you to do some more research and to reach out to some other institutions, right?
Correct.
Bob, you're staying on top of the case law and that and any related topics that have come up in the last 60 years or so. So,
Wow.
are you, when you put it that way, right? I'd like to take a break, and when we come back, I want to go over the communication that you've had, the communication that's going out, but also the case law. All right? Can we do that?
Sounds great.
So stay with us. When we come back, we're going to give you more information about the county council and the use of the First Amendment. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. In the studio with me still is Mr. Bob Taylor from Salisbury, Mr. Joe Scafino from Salisbury. Thanks for sticking around.
Yep.
So, Joe, I want to ask you, what is the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and why has a letter been sent from them to the county council?
All right. Freedom from Religion Foundation, they're an organization that, they're a First Amendment organization that just wants to adhere to the separation of church and state.
Okay.
And that letter was sent because of a complaint I filed. About a year ago, I started to attend council meetings. I wanted to get involved. And the very beginning of the meeting, the council president stood up, invited everybody to say the Lord's Prayer. And I'm saying to myself, that's not right. So I went back after the meeting, I went and looked up. I found a whole bunch of cases in the Fourth Circuit that said absolutely, elected officials, that's considered government speech, and it's prohibited by the First Amendment. So being a new guy on the block, I didn't want to be the skunk at the party. So I didn't say anything. And then last September, at the end of a meeting, Councilman Wynn whipped out his Bible and started reading passages. And he actually asked the council president, do you mind? And he said, okay.
And just to be clear, he read 5 passages.
He read 5 passages. And then he said, the Bible is the only way, and that he knows when not everybody's Christian, but he's going to pray for us. And that crossed a big red line for me and a lot of people in the audience.
Yeah, several folks did decide to leave at that point.
Yeah. So at that point, I realized, you know what? There's no guardrails on this council, on this establishment clause. So I wrote a letter to the very next day. I wrote a very diplomatic letter to all 7 council members, explaining the issue. I provided them the cases, and I heard back from one councilman who said, I basically agree with you. They ought to just do an invocation or a moment of silence. And
I assume that wasn't Councilman James Wynn.
No.
Okay.
So going to the next meeting, I was interested in seeing what was going to happen. And when the following meeting opened with the Lord's Prayer again, I realized, okay, they're not going to change their ways until until something is done. So that's when I contacted the Freedom from Religion Foundation again. I said, look, my letter didn't work, so we need to move forward with this.
And they have sent a letter to the council?
Yes. Okay. They sent it to all. It was addressed to President Cannon, but a copy went to all 7 members.
And Bob, I want to ask you, Joe referenced the case law, and I know you've looked into the same things he has. And look, just so everyone knows out there, I mean, Joe, you're a paralegal, right?
Yes.
And Bob, you're a retired attorney, but you're still very much involved in legal aspects.
Yeah, let me say that the reason I got involved in this, the Lord's Prayer and reading of it does not bother me personally. I went to high school back when they had prayer in the schools.
Okay.
We said it every day. And I started looking at it only because I did find a case, and I think you've mentioned it, in the 4th Judicial Circuit. That's the federal circuit that Maryland is in. There are a bunch of them around the country, I think 13 altogether. But we're in the 4th Circuit. And our law right now is that reading the Lord's Prayer at a council meeting when it's read by the council or the council president is unconstitutional under the First Amendment. I've also looked at other cases, primarily from the 4th Circuit. There have been decisions within the last few years in other counties, one in Maryland, one in West Virginia, one in Virginia. And they've all involved prayer readings by council, not by a chaplain who comes in or a member of the clergy.
Yeah,
there's a distinction there.
Yes.
There have been 2 Supreme Court cases dealing with what we call legislative prayer, but they've both been by chaplains. They have not been by it being read by the council and asking people to stand up or suggesting that they could stand up. So there's a distinction there. The Supreme Court has never considered that. However, they have in the Fourth Circuit in the Lund case and in several cases after Lund that have based their rulings on that, and they've all held that you can't do that.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I come from on it.
Sure.
I've also taken a little bit broader look at the First Amendment generally, which we can get into if we have time,
Yes. Well,
because it is interesting.
you talked about it in the show last week, and you made the rhetorical question: is how did we get from the First Amendment and the No Establishment Clause to the Supreme Court banning prayer in the schools? And I know we've covered that, but there is a connection to this letter from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. There has to be, as Joe said, some guardrails, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and I would say Justice Thomas, Clarence Thomas, is of the view that the First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, that's the Establishment Clause, he believes that does not apply to the states.
Okay.
Because it says Congress shall make no law. And that's been his view. Now, ever since the mid-40s, the Supreme Court has held that does apply to the states.
You had talked about that before. It's
yeah.
expanded since World War
Right.
II.
And basically, there were really no significant First Amendment cases before that happened under the Establishment Clause, because it only applied to the federal government, and Congress didn't make many laws, if any, that applied to religion. Yeah. So there was never any basis for, at least that I can find, that challenged it. But Justice Thomas is of this belief that how do you get from Congress shall make no law to banning prayer in the schools, for example?
Okay.
And that is an interesting question. But nevertheless, for the last 85 years almost, the holdings have been that the First Amendment applies to the states.
So can we make any more correlations between the town of Greece, New York, and that case? Because that one has been referenced at the last county council meeting.
Misquoted, I
Yeah,
think.
well, it was really misquoted in that particular meeting by somebody who stood up and doing public comment.
Hello, everybody. My name is Colin McEvers. I'm a student at Salisbury University. There's been some controversy lately around a county councilman for reading scripture a couple weeks ago. I don't really think there's any problem with this either. I've heard that there are groups that are going to be coming after him for reading a little, the Bible during a meeting. I mean, we had a case with the Supreme Court, Greece versus town of Greece versus Galloway, many years ago, which essentially decided that prayer and religious activities being done by a county councilman or an elected official does not violate the First Amendment.
He characterized it as saying any kind of prayer by the council was okay. And that's not the case at all. It doesn't even involve prayer being led by the council.
Okay.
That particular case involved chaplains coming in or clergymen coming in, being invited by a town board to make invocations. So it didn't really involve it being read by the council. And there's a distinction there. And this Fourth Circuit case I've mentioned, the Lund case, goes into that in great detail and says, no, this is a different matter. When it's done at a council meeting, read by the council, asking people or suggesting that they stand up, and in what they call the intimate setting of a council meeting. And they are pretty intimate. I mean,
Yes.
for example, where we have our council meetings, even though it's a rather large room, is small compared to Congress,
Oh, definitely.
where you have chaplains reading, making an invocation. It's a completely different matter.
And the current process is, the president of the county council asks everybody to join them if they want to. It's an invitation, but everybody is still subject to that prayer, whether you're participating or not, and just like the Pledge of Allegiance as well.
One of the cases that has come in the Fourth Circuit since Lund, the Comanche case from West Virginia, that involved reading the Lord's Prayer, and their council had started doing it right before they called the meeting to order.
Okay.
trying essentially to say, well, we're really not doing it during the meeting. Well, that really didn't cut any mustard in the court.
So did that was shot down as well?
Yeah,
Yes.
that particular case says you can't do that.
Okay.
And for the reasons that are expounded in the Loon case. In other words, it was following the precedent in the Fourth Circuit, of which West Virginia is a part, just like Maryland.
And they considered it government speech,
Yeah.
is what they call it.
So anyway, that's really where we are. We have another case that came up about 5 years ago in Carroll County. That's in Maryland.
Okay. What was it? What was that case?
That was a legislative body reading. They were reading different prayers, not always the Lord's Prayer. Sometimes the Lord's Prayer, sometimes others. That case did not really go to a formal decision. It was settled before any trial was held on it or the court made any decision.
It was consent agreement, right?
Yeah, like a consent agreement, because the Lund case was decided while that case was still pending.
Okay.
And
So
once
that set precedent.
And that set the precedent. In that particular matter, not only did they agree that they couldn't do Lord's Prayer type prayers being read by the council, they also agreed to pay $125,000 in attorney's fees.
Yeah.
And that's what's got my interest, because I think we have not only a very volatile situation. There are people such as Mr. Joe over here who are very much opposed to this. There are others that come to the meeting that say, oh, we ought to do it, we ought to do it. No matter which way we go on this, there are going to be people who are very unhappy.
Hey, I also wonder, is there people who would like to come there and read a Jewish prayer or Islamic prayer or a Hindu prayer? And would we want them to be able to force that on all?
There are a lot of legislators that do that, and that's one of the things that the courts have said. If it's one sectarian prayer over and over by a chaplain or a pastor, that doesn't cut the mustard either. It needs to be spread among different faiths.
We didn't have the First Amendment applying to the states until 1947.
Okay.
That was in a very interesting case. It also involved First Amendment and state law, and it was held that the First Amendment did apply to the states. It was a case against a tax-funded school district that provided reimbursement to parents of both public and private school students who took public transportation to school.
Okay.
In other words, if you paid for your transportation, you could get some reimbursement from the government. And that was held, actually in that case, that was held to not violate the Constitution.
Okay.
Because the payment for the transportation was deemed to have a public purpose, a public benefit.
Okay.
But that's where they came in very hard and said that it's an interesting case. They should say there should be a wall of separation between church and state, but then they exempted this.
Okay.
And that case has been very significant.
What is the name of that case?
That's Everson versus Board of Education.
Gotcha.
Then we got into, and I'm skipping now up about 15 years, when we got into more detailed cases. There was a case involving Maryland had Sunday closing laws.
Okay. Yeah. Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Yeah.
Blue laws.
I remember those as a kid.
That was challenged. In 1961, that was held that it did not violate the Establishment Clause.
Okay.
It was just a day of rest and recreation.
Okay.
Then we got into the school prayer cases. And they're very interesting because there were two cases. In fact, the early 60s was where this really got hot.
Yep.
We had this case in 61 I just mentioned. We had another case in 62. This was the very first school prayer case. It was the Engel case. And that was held to be reading prayers in school was unconstitutional.
Okay.
Then we had the Abington School District versus Shemp, odd name, from Pennsylvania. That was actually two cases combined, one from Pennsylvania, one from Maryland.
Okay.
Maryland in the city of Baltimore had passed a ordinance or a law that required reading of prayers, including the Lord's Prayer, in schools.
Wow.
That was challenged, and that was held to be unlawful,
Okay.
constitutional. That was the Madeline Murray case, if you remember Madeline Murray.
Okay.
Now, there are other cases that have been decided by the Supreme Court in more recent years, within the last 5 years, that also are at least interesting.
Okay.
The first one of these cases was in 2019, American Legion versus American Humanist Association. That involved what they call a peace cross. That was in Maryland. It was a 40-foot peace cross, just a cross. It had been erected in 1925 by the American Legion to essentially memorialize people from a particular county, I think it was Montgomery County, that had died in the First World War.
Okay.
And they chose the cross feature because that was the form of the crosses in the graveyards in Europe in World War I.
And that was originally on private property.
It was
too.
originally also on private property. Over the years, that property became donated to a federal government. It was the Maryland Capital Parks and Planning Commission.
Okay.
And they had maintained it for a few years. And it was the maintaining of it and the money that was spent that was challenged.
Okay.
Well, that was held to be a valid case, use of the money. In other words, it didn't violate the
They didn't
First
have to take it
Amendment.
down.
This was the case where Clarence Thomas said, specifically in a concurring opinion, he agreed with the result, but one of the reasons he agreed with it was because he doesn't think the Establishment Clause has been incorporated against the states.
Okay.
He specifically said that, and he has reiterated that at least once in another case. That would be the Kennedy versus Bremerton School District case that was in 2022. That involved a college football coach in the state of Washington who, after the games, would get down on his knees and pray at the 50-yard line.
Okay.
And this became somewhat controversial. Other people began praying with him, including some of the team members. Somebody complained against it. That's a violation of the First Amendment. It's the establishment of a religion. That was held not to be an establishment of a religion. This year, there was a case involving Oklahoma, a charter school matter. And this would involve using public funds to pay for charter schools that were religious. That was held by the state courts there to be unconstitutional. That was appealed to the Supreme Court. Amy Coney Barrett, one of the justices, recused herself. She recused herself because she had gone to Notre Dame, to the law school, and she had also taught at the Notre Dame Law School. And we think that's the reason. She didn't give a reason, but nobody knows of any other reason that it would be. So that left eight justices. They split 4-4.
Okay.
And it's thought that it was the three Democrat appointees, Sotomayor, I should get the names right here, Brown and Kagan.
Yeah.
And they think that John Roberts joined with them, that he was the fourth.
Okay.
He had previously been with the Republican majority in some of these earlier cases I mentioned.
Well, I'd like to take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the perspective of someone who doesn't have the legal background and is watching from the, trying to participate in government, which is something you both do at times when you take your legal hat off. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what you can expect to see the next time you go to a county council meeting. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. Still in the studio, and now we want to talk a little bit about what you can expect next time you're at the county council meeting. So, Joe, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You have been attending and you've been participating in local government for a year. I've seen you there, and you have a lot of articulate comments about all sorts of things. I've seen you at
Thanks.
PAC 14 and
Okay.
City of Salisbury. Never talked religion with you, had no idea what your stance was. You said at one time on the show that you were kind of going along for the ride, but then you came to a point that you felt like we had crossed the line.
Yeah.
Is this really just come down to like the way James Wynn handled the situation back in September?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That was the trigger. I know for a fact there were Jewish people in the audience. I know for a fact there were some agnostic people in the audience. And, you come to a public meeting to deal with public business. It's a secular setting. It's not a religious setting. Wicomico County is around 60% Christian, which means 40% of us aren't.
Okay.
All right? So when the 40% are not taken into consideration, it creates a uncomfortable atmosphere.
Well, let me give you a different perspective. As a Christian myself, someone who I do like the fact that the Lord's Prayer is read at the beginning. It's comforting to me. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm there to watch county business get done, and I don't want to get distracted. at the very least, this was a huge public distraction, and I really think this really was about performative politics, really performing for a group. Any group that's just getting performed to me, is a distraction to the greater good. And Bob, I want to ask you, what options do you think that the county council has to avoid a costly lawsuit, or even maybe really firm guardrails that maybe really change the look and feel of the county council meetings?
Well, I think that the simplest way would be to stop reading any kind of a prayer by the council.
Okay.
Because the Supreme Court cases, the two I mentioned, they have sanctioned clergy coming in and giving invocations, and they can be somewhat secular.
Yes.
That's the Town of Greece case. So that would be one simple way to do it, that would still have an invocation with clergy.
Sure.
Obviously, the other ways to do it are just to do nothing. And I did make a study. I used artificial intelligence for this, not going into every county and looking, but many Maryland counties, and I think this is true across the country, they do not do anything. They don't do an invocation. They don't do a moment of silence, which are other options.
Well, that's what the city of Salisbury does, right?
An invocation by an invited
Yeah,
pastor.
and if a
Yeah.
pa-
The last meeting, I guess they didn't have anybody, so yes, they had a moment of silence. Yes.
So that would be, another way to do it. So there's several ways that are possible, and it wouldn't make any difference which way the Supreme Court might ultimately go, whether they would come in and say no, reading prayers is fine by the council, because the other cases say that having clergy come in and do it, that's fine too. So it would remove any doubt about the future. And it's going to be probably unlikely that the Supreme Court is going to take a case anytime soon. The reason I say that is because there have only been two cases involving legislative prayer, 1983, 2014.
Okay.
That's 30-year plus split,
Yeah.
just in two cases.
Yeah.
So if we go another 30 years, it's going to be another 20 years before they may not be that long, but there's nothing on the horizon.
Joe is someone who's relatively new, but also very active in the government scene, both in the city of Salisbury and the county. Are you familiar with the mission of the DeMarva conservative movement, and do you feel like some of the issues you're having now or do you feel like they're rooted into their dogma, their goals?
I'm not familiar with the Delmarva conservative movement, so I can't really comment on that.
There are some folks that are part of that have established it as a wing of the Republican Party here in Wicomico County. I want to go back to something Monica Brooks
I was
said.
just going to say that. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and Monica and I, on a political basis, may not agree on everything. It's interesting we are on two different political spectrums, but there's a lot, especially local stuff, that we would agree
Yes.
on. But one of the things that really, I think, got to her was this politicization of religion, because she would not identify herself as a Republican, I don't believe.
No.
And but she would identify herself as a Christian. So I think that it's just interesting because it almost alienates folks who also are Christian, right?
People need to stop calling Christianity a political party. There is no political party of Jesus. And you can't say Republican is the same as Christianity. No, you cannot say that. People are making our faith into something political, and Christ was not even about that.
Joining of Republican Christian excludes people like me.
Yeah, okay.
That was our gist.
That was the gist of what
Yeah.
you said,
And I just want to clarify something too, because, this whole issue isn't about banning prayer or invocation as public. I have no problem with that. My issue is that it was done by an elected official. Salisbury Council has an invocation by a pastor. Absolutely no problem with that.
Even though it's not for you, you're okay with it.
I'm okay with that. But when an elected official starts proselytizing, that's government speech. That's not what he was elected to do.
Well, thank you both. I appreciate your insight. And as more comes up, I hope you come back in and talk about it. Thanks for watching this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back later this week with another new episode.
Yeah, not as much as I think maybe we want to. First of all,
As much as I want.